Hi guys, welcome back to The Social Tune. Back in 2015, I started a YouTube channel, primarily inspired by many of the creators that you and I grew up watching. I had a budding passion for music, both new and old, that my friends were all well tired of hearing about, so I decided to take it to YouTube. And over the years, I've often found myself wondering what my voice added, what my writing style was best suited to. And ultimately, after much soul-searching and time away, I found my answer. I wanted to highlight and shine a spotlight on the music of my home country of Ireland, giving a platform to musical acts while introducing them to all of you in the process, including many bands and artists that most of you would probably completely miss out on if I didn't. And as part of that goal, I now present you with a brand new series, which will focus entirely on promoting and talking about all Irish music. Basically, every week, Ireland releases their Homegrown chart, showcasing the top 20 all-Irish acts whose songs have caught the attention of the public. This is where acts like Picture This, CMAT, Amble, and Fontaines D.C. all got their start before they hit the mainstream. And it's where I personally discovered some of my own favourite contemporary artists, such as Orla Gartland, Kojak, or Kneecap. So on this series, which will primarily consist of shorts and reels over multiple platforms, with the occasional long-form video that I will put together to focus on certain artists who've made a big impact for me, I'm going to consistently highlight new entries onto this chart, providing some backstory to the artists in question, adding, where applicable, some of my own personal history with them, and reviewing each of these songs as they come out. As for the chart itself, there are a couple of things that you should know before we dive in. Unlike the mainstream charts, where an artist is allowed up to 3 songs at one time, here they're only allowed the one, meaning that we'll typically only be looking at the biggest song from an individual project for a time. Because another thing to keep in mind is that a single song can only stay on this chart for a total of 13 weeks. After that, it's fully removed from the chart and typically replaced with the artist's next biggest song at the time, provided it's maintained its traction over the course of those 13 weeks. Hell, sometimes even sooner if their second most popular song becomes their first one before that first one reaches that 13-week peak. This is actually really healthy in my opinion, as it's another way to get a continuous stream of new songs on this chart and prevents the entries from getting too stale. And one more thing to be absolutely clear to any labels or promoters who I know might be watching this video. This will not simply be a series of me promoting the song. I'm always going to share my own opinion, which means while I promise to try and remain constructive, at the end of the day, I'm a very emotional listener, and I always want to make sure that I don't sugarcoat my words too much. So join me, won't you, as we dive in together on this brand new series, Homegrown Heroes.
Way you'll always know the way back home.
So for today's sample test, I'm not just going to focus on one song as I plan on doing for most of this series. Instead, I'm going to review the entire Homegrown chart, all 20 songs as of the first full week of January 2025. From number 20 all the way up to number 1, starting with
Brown boots and bale and twine, won't take her from this heart of mine.
The Danny Byrne Band are a group from County Armagh, primarily known for their folk covers of 2010s hits from artists like The Band Perry and Avicii. Now, the titular frontman of this group has recently started writing his own material again, having seemingly stopped a few years back, and it's a mixed bag.
If I die young, bury me in satin.
The covers can tend to blend together and make the band feel a bit one note, often missing the nuance and the emotion of certain songs.
Sharp knife of a sharp life.
While on the newer stuff, you can tell that there was a lot more thought and effort put into giving each song the performance that best enhances its lyrics. As such, we get Brown Boots, an accordion-led, upbeat love song that describes the classic Irish meet-cute between a lorry driver and a farm girl, whose car has broken down along the side of the road, so he offers to give her a lift. It's a little saccharine, and the farm imagery can feel a little bit cliched for the genre, but I've certainly heard worse. I do have very mixed feelings about the ending though, where she decides that she doesn't want to pursue a relationship, and they share a quick kiss goodbye, as he's left dreaming of one day making her his with all her brown boots, bale, and twine. It's just a tiny bit creepy, in my opinion, to still be pining after she has set some clear boundaries, which might have been forgiven if the song actually followed through with one final verse, as it's feel like it's building to this grand romantic gesture that he's going to perform to win her over, and it just never happens. There's one more hook and then the song comes to an end. Still, it does sound good, and I suppose you could see it as a callback to a simpler time, where Irish folk was less morally complicated than it comes across today, and by those standards, I guess it's alright.
Brown boots and bale and twine.
Heed these words of mine. Life goes by in the blink of an eye, and you're old and disowned.
So here's a band that a lot more of you are probably familiar with. Keywest is comprised of Dubliners Andrew Kavanagh and Andrew Glover. The two Andrews, if you will, who've been active since around 2012. And while their debut album The Message saw a little bit of success at the time of its release, it has since gone triple platinum. Their follow-up Joyland went all the way to #1, and in subsequent years they've even seen international success with songs like C'est la vie. But long intro aside, they really haven't been all that consistent since the start of the decade, only releasing a handful of songs here and there. And yet, there is a part of this new song that does make me smile, where over a pattering drum and light guitars, the protagonists meet an old man on a bus, who laments about the ways that life and the world have passed him by, describing his childhood, the death of his beloved wife, and encouraging the two younger men to follow their dreams. Make sure that you leave your anger and your regrets in the past, before he simply gets off at his stop with a smile and a nod. It's a simple, yet so easily relatable premise about not living with regret that really strikes a chord, coming from someone who has clearly lived and does have some things that he would have liked to change. Now, I do have my gripes. I personally first heard this song a while back on the 6 o'clock show, and I frankly think that the live version absolutely blows the studio one out of the water, which by contrast just feels so overproduced.
So don't go wasting precious time.
And while I'm nitpicking, it's a little ironic that this man is complaining about how youth is wasted on the young, while also telling you to leave your anger in the past. It's almost a little too real, showing off the hypocrisy of people who just dole out unwanted advice. But at the end of the day, the song is quite sweet and rather timeless, especially the live version. So you know what? Good job, lads.
Do the things I wish I'd done.
So here's a fun fact that not many people seem to realize. Snow Patrol is Irish. Kind of. Yes, they were formed in Scotland, and some of the founding members were Scottish, but the only remaining founding members are Irish, including frontman and singer Gary Lightbody, as are all the other current members. So yeah, we're going to claim them. And personally, look, I didn't grow up with this band. My wife loves them, and I know many people who found their mid-2000s breakout album, Eyes Open, or at least the big single Chasing Cars, to be incredibly formative to their musical tastes.
Would you lie with me and just forget the world?
But to me, this has always just been a band with some pretty solid pop rock instincts, whose mixes can nevertheless feel a bit washed out in a The Fray-esque way, with a good but not exactly great vocalist at its center. Sure, he's got a good voice, but he'll never have the raw firepower of a Patrick Stump or a Brandon Flowers to me. But even as a bit of a cynic, I can admit that this album really did feel like a return to form. And this song was the one that started it off. The tense verses that build to that big explosion of drums on the hook, the lyrics about leaving the past behind to finally be his true, authentic, and present self in his relationship, one he almost fucked up with his own past baggage. And sure, in that way, it can feel a little bit damaged, but how is that any different from some of my favorite bands?
I just don't know how to love.
And those lines about being too scared to accept how much she loves him, they hit pretty hard if you've ever found yourself in a relationship with or as someone with self-esteem issues. Solid return to form on a really damn good song. I'll admit it, it grew on me.
I just don't know how to love.
So LJ is a London singer who I primarily know for her pretty impressive R&B output over the last couple of years, having first heard her back on Gardner's single Butterflies and being absolutely shocked that she was only 22. Whereas Cameron Watson is a Kildare producer that plenty of people in the UK and Ireland have been getting familiar with, after his smash single Kisses absolutely blew up the dance scene last year. Now personally, I've always found him just kind of okay. A producer who is passable, with nothing unique or special about him, whose biggest accomplishment last year was probably when he injected Jazzy with some actual life on her verses on Touching Heaven, before promptly dropping the ball and defaulting to that lifeless hook, where Jazzy sounds like her usual unenthusiastic self again.
Got me rising, me rising.
And sadly, I don't think this is much better. Sure, the reverb on those minor keys is kinda cool, but the beat is utterly generic, and the way that he pitches up LJ's vocals and then chops them up like that makes her sound utterly anonymous, and that alone is a crime. It's such a shame to me that I had to triple check that this wasn't some other LJ, because all of her talent and personality are gone from this in favor of a pretty plain dance song that doesn't even build or evolve much over the course of its 3 minutes. At least Kisses had those more stripped back parts that allowed BB Close to breathe a little, whereas this sounds muddy and generic in the worst possible way. Not a good song, I'm sorry.
Somebody tell me to stop. If not, I'm gonna drop. Somebody tell me to stop.
See, this is where some tenure and experience can really go a long way. I've kept a close eye on this Kilkenny duo ever since their excellent 2022 song Believe in Love. An excellent slice of horn-driven electronic indie folk that really captured my attention on first listen. And while I've passively enjoyed their material since, it's been a while since they'd really blown me away until this. Yeah, this is a really quiet flute and drum machine driven track, with these soulful vocals that are pitched and warped all sorts of different ways, begging you to please help them stop before they burn themselves off a cliff permanently, through their excessive use of... well, that's kind of the point, it's left ambiguous. It could be a substance, or work, or any addiction really, that this person is well aware that they're overindulging in to cover up a past pain, and knowing and acknowledging that they can't stop without some help. It's a really powerful song that does so much with so little, cultivating a pretty devastating atmosphere with very few words. And while I could ask for more of a crescendo to really emphasize that building panic, very often these types of self-harming tendencies are more subtle and quiet than that, to the point where nobody notices until it's far too late. And that choked little plea for help, God, how could I ignore it? Great little song. Oh boy, Look, if you've been following my blog for the last couple of years, you know that I have a huge soft spot for these guys. This Dublin band has always been far too earnest for their own good, and their instrumentals were never as textured as I wanted, but damn, that last album, Thoughts and Observations, was a huge step in the right direction. Damn near one of my favourite albums of 2024. And this is the song that started it all, the one that made me believe that this album could be the one. The crescendo that I mentioned missing in the last song is right here, in full force. A powerful and stridently optimistic song, where frontman Danny O'Reilly is doing everything he can to save this relationship, knowing that he needs to stop fixing and start listening. Grow the fuck up and trust his partner to speak up and tell him what he's missing. And it's kind of heartbreaking as he begs them to meet him in the middle, recognize that despite his past fuck-ups, he's trying and he's willing to compromise, and yet that question is never answered, leaving this desperate open plea of a man who is trying to grow, willing to take the feedback right on the chin if needs be, with those phenomenal horns and the keys exploding out to nothing. To no reply. Again, damn near one of my favorite songs of last year. Absolutely adore this.
I'm so hungover I could die. What the hell happened last night?
But personal growth, yeah, that's not really our style in Ireland. No, most of us learn our lessons for about a day and then quickly forget them so we can repeat them. Hence, you have the comedy duo turned singers from Tipperary, Two Johnnies, describing the worst hangover of their lives, begging for death as they struggle to remember what the fuck happened last night. And what a night it was. Getting your auntie in a headlock, drinking 12 times the amount that you intended, accidentally kissing your cousin, and ending the night with God's greatest food, the kebab, which, as many of us know, is not quite so kind to your digestive system the morning after. And yet, despite initially declaring that they will never ever drink again, it's all really bound to repeat itself the next time he goes out. Yes, it's a dumb song, but it clearly knows it. And it's so detailed that I can't help but really enjoy it. Waking up in the bathtub craving Lucozade, your mouth as sandy as Gandhi's sandal, and being as shook as a bottle of Yop are all way too good for me to critique. This duo is admittedly not everybody's cup of tea, and I recognize that their production generally doesn't really stray too much from the simple drum, bass, and guitar every single time. And no, they don't have the ambition of a ninja sex party, but this is a comedy duo first and a band second. This was supposed to make me laugh, and even now, every single time it plays, I give it a chuckle.
I'm so hungover I could die. And if I don't leave now, I'm never gonna find my avalon.
And just like that, we're back to one of the absolute best rock songs of last year. I'm not kidding. As much as I've enjoyed all of Darren Kiely's output since his excellent song Time to Leave a couple of years ago, this is absolutely my favorite song that the Cork native has made to date. And part of the reason should be obvious. I mean, yes, you have that wonderful cajon-driven groove that builds to that magical piano-backed chorus that just makes your blood pump with pure joy, reminding me more than a little of Sam Fender. And the King Arthur reference is always going to win big points with a folklore nerd like me. But no, the real reason I love it is just the central theme. I am such a sucker for songs reminiscing about the town or city you grew up in, even when the harsh lesson that you're learning is that you've got to leave it all behind. Where Darren does acknowledge that this place will always be special and shaped him in many wonderful ways. But he still has this burning desire to go out there and find a new paradise away from home, very much mirroring the Arthurian legend. It doesn't invalidate or discredit where he started, but he knows deep down that he has to trust his gut and move on. Find a new place that he can turn into his very own Avalon. It's frankly just an epic song, and while I don't really know whether I would put it above or just below Speak Up, if I were to rank this top 20 at all, there are several great songs coming up that would also be contenders to top that list. Rest assured that it is very much in the running. Great song. Níl Gaeilge agam ach tom ag fólam. I'm ashamed to say that because I grew up abroad for a good part of my life, I've never actually learned to speak Gaeilge. I'm open to trying, especially if I'm going to keep promoting Irish music on this channel, but it's a work in progress that may yet take me many years. In the meantime though, I bring you Simon Casey, a former Eurovision contestant who had some huge charting success for a very brief time during the mid-2000s, who has now pivoted to being a full-time wedding singer in his home county of Offaly. Honestly, artists like Dermot Kennedy and Cian Ducrot should really take notes, as this feels like a very natural next step for these primarily acoustic folk artists and belters who can win contests with their big loud voices. Even though he did get beaten out by We've Got the World by Mickey Hart that year, a much more dynamic song which is somehow much less ambitious, which means I think Simon Casey would have honestly performed better at Eurovision that year. Not that it would be the last mistake that Ireland would make regarding that contest, but I digress. The point is, becoming a wedding singer seems like a great career move for these artists after they stop charting. And credit where it's due, it's a full song as Gaeilge. It's performed very prettily, the instrumentation is quite tasteful, but considering the only two words that I can confidently translate are "Oh Jesus," I have a feeling that this is supposed to be some psalm or church hymn, and that's just not really my thing. It's pretty, but it's also a little weird to see it place over much more interesting songs, at least in my opinion.
And that was the beginning of me ultra love with me and his home, boys home.
The Mary Wallopers are a Dundalk band who really blew up during the COVID-19 lockdown. As a very populist, light-hearted Irish folk group, whose music has always felt very organic and authentic. Now personally, I was a bit late to them, only hearing them a couple of years ago, back when I watched them perform Eileen Og on The Late Late Show, which really impressed me, with their harmonies, their lush instrumentation, and their pretty witty songwriting that still feels very entrenched in classic Celtic folk. And while this is by no means their best, it's still a very sweet sounding little ditty from 4 years ago, all about missing home that is currently seeing a resurgence thanks to a brief bit of virality on TikTok. It's brief and charming, even if the mother on the song gets abandoned at the end with their twin boys.
He left me with a pair of twins to dangle on me knee, and it's home, boys home.
A little dark, and I will admit that the tone of the song feels a bit inconsistent overall. The guitars just sound a bit too jovial for this pretty sinister subject matter, where the sailor, docks his boat in her port and then leaves, if you'll excuse the euphemism. But it's also the kind of easily charming Irish country folk that I find very hard to resist, as it's noticeably rougher and less polished than, say, Danny Byrne, which is how I personally prefer my Irish folk, especially when it's so traditionally inclined in both its sound and its lyrics.
We're all growing green in the North Country.
I'm going to your house tonight.
And on a very different note, did Elijah Hewson just get really sick and tired of being compared to his dad Bono? Understandable, I suppose, and that's really the only explanation I could find for this pivot, as it's much grungier than their past songs, almost straying into garage rock, and yet also kind of reminding me of mid-2000s Pink in some ways. This Dublin band shouldn't be new to any of my regular viewers, having made several of my favourite songs over the past 5 years, one I've been lucky enough to see live twice, and at this point, I feel fairly qualified in saying that they're the real deal, they're not a facsimile of anybody. Hence this new song, all about the chase, the need to pursue something or someone that is clearly bad for you. pulling up to their place at all hours of the night, even though every single instinct is screaming at you to run away. And the instrumental with that nasty little bass and kick drum combo really emphasizes that danger. As I said, it's a very different sound for this band, where the chorus just explodes with those choral backing vocals and those strident piano chords that reminded me more than a little bit of Sarah Bareilles, all topped off with, I'll say it, the best music video of last year. Genuinely pretty awesome. I'm still not quite sure whether I'd put it among their absolute best, but it still makes me so excited for where that new album might be going.
Talking that bad money, that mad money. Only get silly for billion. I said I'ma need a couple more zeros on that.
So, I don't really know what happened in 2024, but Dublin singer Jazzy, who's been on my shit list since she and Belters Only released Make Me Feel Good, finally started developing the bare minimum of what one might call good taste and personality. I mean, pair her with C+ rapper Headie and DJ Casso, responsible for the surprising earworm Prada last year, and this should have been a smash hit. And yet it wasn't. And the reason why was a little hard to pin down at first. I mean, Jazzy sounds as anonymous as ever, but that's never stopped the Irish public before, and at least she's kind of trying here. The beat is decent and danceable. Headie ad-libs are there. I even think the hook is decently strong. It reminds me of Casso's last big hit, and there it is. See, if you liked Prada, a lot of the same tricks are repeated on this one. Except Jazzy is just so many tiers below Ray as a performer. Ultimately, that makes this a decent song that probably deserved better, but the Irish public was nowhere near gullible enough to fall for it. Instead, we just made Prada one of the biggest hits of the year yet again. Same difference, really.
I'ma need a couple more zeros on that.
I would burn the world to bring some heat to you.
Finally, a man who needs no introduction. Yeah, take that, Snow Patrol. Hozier was one of the biggest artists of 2024, and has been one of Ireland's most profitable exports for the last decade. So coming off the success of Too Sweet last year, it makes all the sense in the world that that last album would receive another extended edition, this one called Unreal Unending Unearth, that was released back in December to capitalize on his name. And as for this song, it's alright. I mean, it's still Hozier, the gospel instrumentation is still grandiose, but I'm really not a fan of that swampy vocal mixing on the pre-chorus and the second verse. And lyrically, it's treading a lot of similar ground as his last project, while also not measuring up to its best material. In other words, it's the kind of track that makes sense to pin onto the tail end of the extended edition, because it just wasn't good enough to make the original track list. I'm not saying that it deserved to be left on the cutting room floor, but I'd be lying if I said I'd miss it.
I would burn the world to bring some heat to you.
I'll only have a mouthful, no more than that I swear. I'm only gonna drink it down to there.
So I run in a lot of circles where picture this is kind of a punchline. The painfully mainstream Kildare pop rock group who broke out in the 2010s and have since been desperately chasing another mainstream hit. And I mean, look, they're a pop band first, a rock band second. There's no denying that. But I've really found myself enjoying a fair bit of their output over the last couple of years. Hell, Parked Car Conversations was even on my list of the best albums of 2024. Again, it's a pop album, but the naked sincerity that feels really devoid of any irony is something I'm just a sucker for. This, on the other hand, is not quite that. I can only imagine that they released this in order to have a crowd pleaser to play at their gigs, but it's a pretty slow and spare tune about a guy who clearly has a drinking problem, as he wakes up thirsting for a pint, but he'll only drink some of it. He'll only drink it down to there. And look, as someone with a few friends with a fondness for the old drink, I'm not quite sure how seriously I'm supposed to take this. Sure, it could be commentary on Ireland's drinking culture, or it could be poking fun at the people who would judge it. Regardless, it's a pretty good, stripped-back song with no chorus, just 4 pretty vivid verses. But while I do passively enjoy it, it's nothing I haven't heard before. Pretty, yes, but nowhere near as punchy as I know this band can be.
And join me while I drink it down to there.
Just want someone to put me first and be the one to get on me when I'm at my worst. I wanna know how love works.
Okay, here we go. An artist who isn't even a really big household name in Ireland yet. Actually, I say that, but this young woman went viral back when she was only 12, even appearing on The Ellen Show in 2018, yikes. And in fact, since the age of 11, she's been a busker, aka a street performer, in Cork and in Dublin, again since she was 11 years old. The kind of young prodigy to really outshine anything that most of us have done with our lives at twice or even 3 times her age. Now, my own insecurities of her aside, I've seen clips of her performing and she's got a really impressive voice, especially considering she's 19, which has, of course, led to some people being skeptical about her age. I swear to God, nobody tears down the Irish like the Irish. But anyway, this new song is pretty decent. The melody is jacked straight from Journey's Don't Stop Believing, and I definitely think that it all sounds a bit too clean and polished, but knowing her age, the plea to find someone who will make her a priority and show her how love is supposed to work makes a lot more sense, as it hits a lot more strongly coming from a woman of that age where you're still trying to figure life out. Just goes to show that you can be successful at an early age and yet still feel entirely out of your depth about certain grown-up topics even 8 years into your career. And for what it's worth, I really do hope she finds what she's looking for.
I wanna know how love works.
Sitting too long, getting woolly on the shelf. Wasn't too far gone when it comes to mental health, but I'd be sick in the head with a little bit of wealth.
So, for those of you who checked out my best albums of 2024, it should be no surprise that I am a huge Kneecap fan. Even before all the hype and the album and that feature film last year. Check that last one out, by the way. It kicks ass. This Belfast duo's story to finding success and their unwavering mission to sustain and revitalize the Irish language by sticking it to the Brits has definitely made them a pariah in certain company, but has also led to a massive underground movement that is fast growing and has even started to affect the mainstream charts. Heck, their best song, HOOD, is in the top 50 singles chart as I'm writing this. And even if all of that weren't the case, Sick in the Head would still be awesome. The banging beat, the trade-off of bars, that awesome hook that hits you full force with a mix of Gaeilge and English, and lyrics reflecting being way past the point of no return in terms of your mental health. So fuck it, why not just double down? After all, if you're already sick in the head, might as well make some money off it. It's very funny and pointed brag rap. Almost preempting the argument, well, you might have made all this money from rapping, but you're still miserable, and responding with, yeah, no shit, I was fucked in the head long before I had cash. But there's something weirdly inspirational about it. A strident anthem to follow your own dreams and your passion, forging your own path, regardless of common sense or other people's opinions. Even if you have to make a deal with the devil to do it. And frankly, if you do it right, you might even leave him speechless. It's a great song, one of the best off of that album last year, and one of the best bangers here.
Let me see it get low, baby, shake it to the flow. People come and they go non-stop though. You know the vibes you get live, Jiggy Joy, on a 9 to 5, I'll stop, bro.
Ugh, why? Yes, we follow up one of my favorite duos in music with one of my least favorite. For the record, no, Belters Only still haven't apologized to Lynn Lockamy for stealing from her, and while I have personally taken great pleasure in watching them flounder in the past couple of years, trying to recapture that mainstream success, they have still found a way to sneak back onto the charts under the guise of working with other artists. Although even Jazzy seems to be a little sick of working with them now. Small miracles. Anyway, my coverage of these two predates them as a group, as I was reviewing Robbie G's and Bissette's solo work long before they broke into the mainstream together. Hell, I was even a Bissette fan to some degree. So I can tell you with confidence that as soon as they started making music together, this Dublin duo not only lost all their credibility because of their sticky fingers, but also got significantly more watered down and boring. They very quickly went from setting the trends to chasing them, as evidenced by the entire waste of time that was their debut album. But look, credit where it's due, this song is alright. No, it's nothing new in terms of dance floor jams, but the simplicity kind of works to the song's favor. And I think the decision to handle the majority of the vocals themselves, as far as I can tell, was ultimately a good choice. It gives the phrase awstopbro a lot more authenticity when it's said with a Dublin accent.
You know the voice you get live, Jiggy Joy on a 9 to 5, awstopbro.
The beat is mostly pretty good until those nasal synths come in to bring it crashing back down to earth. But I do like that they let the mix speed up a little and let the instrumental breathe after the first hook, as it kind of mimics a live DJ set. And yes, of course I like Dizzy Rascal, he's far too silly not to enjoy. Even though I don't think they make anywhere near as good use of him as Calvin Harris did all those years back.
Tell your boyfriend, hold your jaw and dance. You blast me, that's why I'm asking beats, so let's party beat. Come and dance with me.
So yeah, begrudgingly, I don't think this is bad. I'd even say that of the songs currently in the top 10, it's better than Hozier's. Fuck.
And the Lord up above, kill la 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 la. For the green and the white I adore.
Kingfishr is a band that I'd heard about long before I heard their music. A collective from Wexford, Laois and Limerick that started releasing songs back in 2022. Irish folk that felt both traditional and yet defiantly modern. Primarily thanks to the excellent fusion of the rich voice of Headie, Banjo Wizard Magoo, and the fucking concertina player known as Fitz. I don't think I'd quite put them on the same level as Ye Vagabonds just yet, but this is still a group whose output I've really enjoyed, even after a year of overexposure. And as for this new song, it's a very pretty one. Taking their cues from other folk acts who recently made it big, we'll get to them, Kingfishr is now incorporating more jangling banjos. Headie's vocals pick up a deeper timbre than ever. I swear, you'd never believe that this guy was 26. And that huge sing-along hook, it's also warm and glorious, calling back to their trad roots more than ever.
For the power is to last evermore.
Now, I will say, it's a little light when it comes to the verses. The songwriting ultimately boils down to an ode to the titular grey church, wishing to be buried near it as it'll stand as a proud monument long after you're dead and buried after going to war for your country. Which is all well and good, but it feels a little bit spare, and that means that I can't quite put it among their best. But look, if this is the first true indication as to where that new album's sound might be going, which is clearly supposed to be the focus of this, I'm very excited.
By the river de Soul. See the way I see and shine like you can shine. I wish for you the best that life can be.
My god, the banjo is such a wonderful instrument. And if there is one band that knows how to make it shine even more than Kingfishr, it would be these breakout stars of last year. Amble have been active for a while now, but 2024 was their year, as they had several songs vying for attention on the Hot 100 singles chart. And while they never had a huge hit per se, this was still their biggest song yet. Oisín McCaffrey is such a talented singer, His hoarser drawl just feels so timeless here, describing a tough old bastard who smokes too much and generally hates people, only to then show him on the happiest day of his life, at his wedding. And as I highlighted back when I covered this song on my blog, I really appreciate the fact that there's no mention of, oh, every man just needs a woman to set him straight, as so many of these traditional songs tend to do. Instead, the partner is left entirely genderless, and it's better for it, making for an absolutely gorgeous love song. I do still prefer Lonely Island, that's still their best song in my opinion, but this is phenomenal, one of their best, and really does deserve to become a proper hit. Come on, 2025, just give me this one.
You've been my favorite for a long time.
And ending on a big high note, you know, I really could risk my street cred by still saying that I kind of prefer that Coronas song or the Darren Kiely one. But to be honest, if there is one song in the top 20 at the moment that not only deserves to become a legacy hit, one of those songs that we're still going to be singing along to 50 years from now, but might even still become one, it's this. Easily the Fontaines song that has attracted the most attention and critical acclaim to date, and it just so happens to be the most joyous tune they've ever written. And really, who can blame everyone? Those glorious major guitar chords, the driving drum line, that absolute earworm of a hook, all culminating to that blissful bridge and final chorus. Brian Chatton himself has said that this is an ode to one or several loved ones who have helped him get to where he is today, and that the sound was heavily inspired by the 50s, and yeah, you can tell. It's the most throwback yet defiantly happy song that this Dublin band has ever made. The closing track to their excellent landmark album Romance last year, and yet, it's not quite my favourite. I prefer the more conflicted, darker moments on the album like Starburster or In the Modern World, or even their first true mainstream hit, Bug. But even with all that being said, I cannot deny this song's power. Hell, you'd have to be unfeeling or deaf not to hear the magic behind it. And I am so delighted that as of writing this, this is the biggest song on the chart, and deservedly so. So there you go, the first edition of Homegrown Heroes. I very much look forward to continue researching and writing about these artists and presenting them to you. So if you're interested, please subscribe and or go follow me on Instagram, and yes, TikTok. Regardless of where you follow me, I will be covering each and every song that hits the Homegrown charts this year. So feel free to share your feedback and your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for an anniversary list of sorts next time, you'll see. And until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is The Social Tunes, signing off.